sharing a platform tonight with the likes of Christine and Jerry and speaking at such a historic podium. I must admit that even though Rita O'Hare is someone that I've idolised my entire life, I was rather hesitant when she asked me to speak on the topic of young people in the vanguard for the Republic. Because despite the fact that I no longer consider 36 years of age to be young, nor am I in the vanguard, I'm very conscious of the fact that we in the Irish Republican family are so fortunate to have as many older inspirational figures such as Gerry Adams, who will be speaking here in a short while, and the aforementioned Rita. Both of those people and many others like them have dedicated their entire lives to our struggle, and both continue to be driving forces within the movement to achieve the Republic dreamt of by the heroes of 1916. Much of what I had planned to say tonight is almost redundant after Christine's presentation, but there's a nice fit into the start of it, so I won't be boring you for too long with the middle, and I'll just jump to the end. But the Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset told us that a revolution does not last more than 15 years, the period which coincides with the flourishing of a generation. It is those generations gone before that strove to establish our republic with the youth of the country in the vanguard. We need only have looked at the slides that were presented and looked at the age of the major players, the major participants. The vast majority were in their 20s and early 30s. Each generation, and those of the earlier generation, learn and evolve our politics from their past and shared experiences, and the youth who naturally appear in the vanguard add vitality to the experiences and wisdom of the previous revolutionaries. Any analysis of the Irish struggle will show that the older generation supported and nurtured the youth, as for without them, the revolution would have been a stillbirth. That is as true today as it was in 1916 and every other momentous period in the fight for Irish freedom. This can be especially said of the men and women who rose up 100 years ago and shook an empire. Those considered to be the leaders at the time who challenged British imperialism and were executed for their efforts, they ranged in age from about 25 to 58. Nevertheless, it is accepted that the majority of those who took on the might of the empire on the streets of Dublin in that momentous week were in their late teens and early 20s. Michael Collins, for instance, he was 26 years of age and he assumed one of the commanding roles at the GPO. In the following Tan War, many of the prominent Republicans were a perfect example of youth in the vanguard of the Republic. Tom Barry was in his early 20s when he took the fight to the British in West Cork, as was Dan Breen in Tipperary. Sean Tracy was 25 and Kevin Barry 18 when they died. Of the leaders in 1916 who were more mature in years, all had developed their revolutionary instinct at a very young age and had been involved in active Republican politics since their teens. Colony, as you know too well, had dedicated his entire adult life to improving the conditions of working people in Scotland, Ireland, and of course here in the USA as well. Thomas Clark had already spent 15 years in prison for his activism, and Thomas Kent also spent a period in prison. Sean McDiarmid, it is said, claimed his Republican politics were nurtured by, I think, what you would call an elementary school teacher when he was but a child. And Michael Hanrahan claimed his idealism developed while growing up listening to all the stories of his ancestors' involvement in the Fenian Rising. And just as the men and women of 1916 drew their inspiration and motivation from the efforts of the United Irishmen and Fenians, young Republicans today remember the sacrifices made on our behalf from 1916 to the 1920s during the border campaigns, and particularly since 1969. In fact, the method of struggle that we are involved in today probably would not have been developed as soon, or indeed at all, were it not for the sacrifices and the efforts of young men and women in Armagh Prison and the H-Blocks. As I said earlier, youth shaped and drove the ideology and strategies of the older Republicans, but each new experience allowed a collective understanding to develop that encompassed the best of each generation. For nearly a century, whether it was Tom Ashe in 1917, Michael Gahan in 1976, or Mairead Farrell and Francis Hughes in the 1980s, young Republicans, even when they were incarcerated, strove to find ways to create yet another front on which they could advance the cause for Irish freedom. With no other weapons available to them, they used their own bodies in hunger strike. And reading the accounts of the survivors, this was possibly one of the most painful and selfless ways to sacrifice your life for Ireland. For 35 years, all parts of the world have recognized and celebrated the sacrifice and leadership of Bobby Sands and his 9 comrades who gave their lives slowly and painfully for a cause they believed so strongly in. It wasn't the first time in our history the young gave their life in such a way for the Republic, but hopefully it will never be the case again. Given the year that's in it and the history that we are celebrating here tonight at this event, I'm going to share a little bit of probably unknown history with you. The 1981 hunger strikes rightly caught the imagination of the world. However, not as many people would know that 4 years earlier, on the 6th of March 1977, 20 IRA prisoners in an Irish prison embarked on a 48-day hunger strike. These strikers were young men, and it is very important that their story is also recounted because it has been forgotten by the Free State politicians who this week are accusing Sinn Féin of not being Republican. For 48 days, those men that were detained by the Irish state at Portlaoise jail refused any food or nourishment and were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice that was made a number of years later by their comrades in the H-Blocks so that their struggle would not be criminalised and the brutality and inhumane treatment of their comrades would end. Appalling physical conditions, daily strip searches and beatings, unjustified and prolonged use of solitary confinement, and psychological torture was, in the words of the prisoners themselves, systematic within Portlaoise jail. In a journal that to this day remains unpublished, the prisoners stated, as March 1977 approached, it became clearer as each day passed that nothing short of a hunger strike would be needed to highlight the intolerable conditions and force the administration to change its brutal policy. I'm going to read tonight extracts from 2 letters that were written by one of those striking prisoners. In fact, they were penned by a staff member at the Curragh Military Hospital because after so long without food, he had lost his sight. The first was written 32 days after the strike began, and the prisoner, in fairness, reading the rest of the letter, was obviously resigned to the fact that the demands were not going to be met and striking to death was inevitable. The second extract will be taken from a letter that he wrote the day after his strike ended. And the reason I'm going to share those with you tonight is what is remarkable about them and their relevance to tonight's event is that despite the passing of 6 decades in between, very little had changed about the type of person committed to Irish republicanism. The similarities with the letters penned by the Irish leaders to their families before their execution is obvious. Concern only for others, their families, and particularly their people. And their steadfast commitment to their beliefs were no different to those of the heroes in 1916 or those who led from the front in the most recent phase of our armed struggle. The 7th of April, 1977. Dear Mammy, I'm very proud of the way you and the family are standing by me. I do hope that everything is going all right at home. I would imagine all the cows are calved by now and all the crops are set as well. Did Brian pull up the boat after the fishing? Be sure and make him start the outboard motor at least every 2 weeks. Mammy, be sure and look after yourself, and don't be worrying, as I am thinking of you and the boys all the time. I will write again the end of the week, but should you not get a letter, I don't want you worrying. Look after yourself and keep your chin up. God bless. 23rd of April, 1977. Dear Mammy, just a few lines to let you know how relieved I am for you, Brian, and Danny that the hunger strike has ended without loss of life. We had our first meal this morning for 48 days. Porridge, a cup of tea, and a half a slice of toast, which was beautiful. Do not worry about me. It will take time to recover completely, but please God, by June, I should be in good shape. I cannot put into words my gratitude for the tremendous courage you and Brian showed when you visited me here last Thursday, and the way you stood by me all the way. Without your courage and support, I don't think I could have stood up to the strike. I prayed night and day for you and Brian, and thank God they have been answered. I hope to take you on a well-earned holiday and try and make up for all the hardship and agony you must have went through in the last few years. I nearly broke down the last day you came up, but seeing you in such spirits really lifted me up and kept me going to the end if necessary, as I knew you would understand. I'm very proud to say here tonight that the mammy who hid her heartache and tears from her son on the 21st of April 1977, believing it would be the last time she would see him alive, was my granny, Agnes Ferris. By sheer coincidence, my mother, who had not even met my father at the time, had travelled up with another Cumann member to drive my grandmother to the Curragh Military Hospital. And both her and Anya Lynch tell the story of how my grandmother, who, if truth be told, was not a Republican and was, let's just say, a little dismayed by her two sons' Republican activities, how she refused to let her son or those guarding him see her devastation that day. She actually pulled my uncle aside before he went in, and obviously they thought they were going up and visiting their loved brother and son for the last time, and he was quite emotional, and she pulled him to the side and she told him, "You have to be brave and you have to be strong for your brother. You cannot let him see our hurt. We have to be strong for him." And my uncle was the Republican and my grandmother was not. And my mother tells the story that my grandmother walked out of the gates that day and sat into the car with her head held high. And when they were a few miles down the road and nobody could see, that was when she succumbed to her grief and her heartache, and the tears fell. But there was no way that she was going to let her son think she wasn't backing him to the end. And even though she may not have been Republican in ideology, she certainly behaved like a Republican that day. I'm equally proud to say that my father was one of the 20 hunger strikers in 1977. And the reason I'm proud is that at 24 years of age, he could have been living a carefree and comfortable life on his small family farm in County Kerry and fishing part-time out of Feenet Harbour, one of the most beautiful places in our country. But instead, like very many of you in the hall here tonight, due to your instinctive sense of justice and fairness, and even though you were not directly affected by the actions of the army that was occupying part of our country, he, like you, chose to support the Republican cause when he turned 18 years of age. And then just before his 25th birthday, he found himself embarking on a hunger strike that lasted 48 days. After his release, you will be glad to know, he did return to fishing from Feenet, but unfortunately for my mother, it wasn't always fish that he caught. And as you may also know, he ended up back in Portlaoise prison again, tried to get out a couple of times, they were unsuccessful, and he served a decade and was released in 1994. But he and other prisoners, including some of those who were on the 77 hunger strike with him, continue to this day to play a pivotal role in trying to achieve a better Ireland for all of our people. He, like Gerry Adams and Rita O'Hare and some of you that I've met here this evening, have given your entire lives to the Republican movement. And I am delighted that none of you are showing any signs of our desires of wanting to retire anytime soon. And that, to me, is what is inspirational and what is so great about Irish republicanism. Irish Republicans never feel, despite all the sacrifices they may have made and the huge contribution they have given, they never feel that they have given enough, nor will they, until their objectives are achieved. For young Republicans today, dreaming of that republic, we are in a better place than our older comrades were when they started out on their mission. And we can see farther for one reason, as we are standing on their shoulders. From our vantage point, we can see that republic solely because of their contributions and sacrifices. In my mind, it is essential for this generation of young Republicans to not just be proud of your role and the role played by members of Old Ignaherin, be it in 1916 or in 1986, but we have to strive to ensure that their commitment, that the sacrifices have been worth it. Far too many parents have buried their children, and far too many children have had to spend their childhood visiting a parent inside prison gates. Too many children have gone their entire childhood pretending to friends, pretending even to their own family, as in cousins and aunts and uncles, that they didn't actually have a daddy, when in fact they did, but he just happened to be on the run. For the wounds inflicted on generations of Irish people, we must achieve the values of Irish republicanism. And the current young people in the vanguard have to develop and deliver the republic that our people deserve. We have to deliver unity, equality, and ensure that we have control over our nation's destiny and economic resources. Young Republicans today must provide new ideas and follow the example of the likes of Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness in their younger years and think the impossible, speak the unsayable, and reinvent republicanism for the 21st century. We have come to a stage in 2016 that we will never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, We have to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. We need to build a 32-county republic. We need to inspire people to hope that with their own hands, they can actually turn the wheels of history. And after tonight's presentation by Christine, it is no doubt that we have a very proud history. We have heroic memories to inspire us, but we have not achieved a united Ireland and the kind of republic that the best and bravest of every Irish generation fought for. We cannot be the keepers of the flame to pass it on to another generation. As Matt Carting, one of our brightest and most committed of our young leaders, as he said at last weekend's Ardèche, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Young leaders like Matt and Pearse Doherty, and I'm delighted to announce that we have 2 new young senators in Fintan Warfield and Niall O'Donnell as of today, and many more like them. They, I believe, will be the people who will stand shoulder to shoulder with the generation before us and will lead us to a situation where we can persuade the majority of the people of Ireland to share our dream for a better Ireland, to join us in making it a reality. They will light a fire across our small nation that will show Ireland the dawn of its new republic. It is no longer enough for Republicans to be undefeated. It's time for us to win. Gur míle maith agaibh.
In June of 1963, President John F. Kennedy said, "No people ever believed more deeply in the cause of Irish freedom than the people of the United States." Gerry Adams and his partner in the United States, Rita O'Hare, who comes here quite often, knits us together person by person, organization by organization. She unites us here in the United States to support and build solidarity for a united Ireland. She's missed tonight. For those of you that know Rita and know how tireless she is, to many of us, she serves as our mentor and our friend and our partner. And I'm sure she's going to get a full report tonight, so if we could please, just so I don't forget, give her a huge round of applause. While researching Dr. Keneally, I came upon a quote that she published about Frederick Douglass' time in Ireland and his search to meet Daniel O'Donnell. O'Donnell had said, "I'm a friend of liberty in every clime, class, and color. My sympathy is not confined to the limits of my own green island. My spirit walks abroad on sea and land, and wherever there is oppression, I hate the oppressor." This quote is quite fitting for the president of Sinn Féin, our next guest, Gerry Adams. Gerry Adams will be talking with us tonight about how a united republic will be achieved. He is responsible, with Rita, for our reawakening through Sinn Féin's massive organizing efforts and reconnections with Irish America over the past 20 years since he set foot on American ground. He elevates the discussion on colonialization and its effects and the unification of Ireland. His presence and insistence that we own the Irish experience and narrative and push back on revisionists around the uprising helps us not only with our commitment to the reunification of Ireland, but at healing the deep scars of oppression, racism, misogyny, and classism here in the United States and throughout the world. Gerry pushes us to become better Republicans, but also fosters partnerships in struggle with other oppressed peoples. And with that, and without further ado, our brother and friend in solidarity, Mr. Gerry Adams, the president of Sinn Féin.
Well, Díomh agus míle buíochas Bernadette, bhí the focail go háin fleathúil agus go háin Yas agus Tommy go háin brodúil, a bheith libse a nacht agus bhhailm fáilte chu raibh ahan duine an seo ag Coopers Union Hall agus má buíochas fásta de cáirde sin féin agus de Marty Glennon go háirithe agus na ceoltóirí a bhí ann agus bhí mé háan sásta leis an méid a dúirt Christine agus Toireasa Ferris. Just want to say I'm delighted to be here this evening, and I want to thank the Friends of Sinn Féin for organising these 2 nights of discussion on the centenary of the 1916 Rising and its significance for the future. And I want to thank everybody who put this event together, or these events together, but particularly, if I may, just thank Marty Glennon for all of his work. I also want to thank the musicians who played earlier and the singers, so Goramila, my Ogov Gulyar Foster. So, you know, anytime I come here, and I'll do the same this evening, I see it as an opportunity to thank our many friends here who, as Toireasa has said, have long supported the struggle for Irish freedom. And that includes the American Labour movement. And Christine's talk took us through all of that history. And one of the threads through it all was the constant continuity and connectiveness with the Irish in North America. So thank you, my friends, for that. This hall, Cooper's Hall, it was founded by Peter Cooper, and I just read a little plaque on the way in earlier, a most progressive thinker and doer. And as the acting president told us earlier, this forum has seen many speakers on issues of huge significance to society, whether it's on the rights of trade unions or against racism and slavery, on equality, and on issues of international concern. But it was really interesting to hear that James Connolly was here, maybe at this very podium, that the Fenians were here, that the Land League was here, that Michael Davitt was here, that Abraham Lincoln was here, and the role of democracy and constitutional rule has been debated here over a very long time. And that reflects Peter Cooper's own stated view of a world in which knowledge shall cover the earth as waters cover the great deep. So what I'm going to try and do here, and I'll be as brief as I can, is to try and deepen your knowledge and hopefully motivate you to see your part within your own capacity and within your own capability, your part, as Toireasa put it very well, bringing about the point where Republicans win. Because when Republicans win, the people of Ireland win, that we have our own destiny, that we have our own sovereignty, that we have our own state, and that we develop our own society the way we want to develop it. And it is worth recapping the hugely important role that the Irish have played here. Even before the USA, even before the United States was founded, there are Irish signatures in the founding documents of this republic. In the American War of Independence, the Irish were there, fighting for your right to freedom and independence from the British. And George Washington put it well. He said, when the friendless, our friendless standard was first unfurled, who were the strangers who first mustered around our staff. And when it reeled in the light, who were more brilliantly sustained and who sustained it than Aaron's generous sons? And when it was all over, and when the 13 colonies had won their independence, how did the British respond? One British official famously complained, "We have lost America through the Irish." Hasten the day. Hasten the day that they lose Ireland through Irish America. When Abraham Lincoln led the fight to end slavery, over 100,000 Irish Americans and newly arrived Irish fleeing the aftermath of Gartamore, the Great Hunger, joined the struggle. The Irish have helped to build this economy, build the cities, build the railways, build the infrastructure, and played a hugely important role in the political, cultural, and social life of the United States of America. And from the earliest days of trade unionism here, the Irish have been in the leadership of that movement also. And the trade unions have been hugely supportive of the Irish cause. They embraced Connolly's assertion that the cause of Ireland is the cause of labour, and that the cause of labour is the cause of Ireland. The Irish Republican Brotherhood, which planned the rising, was born here. Clan na Gael and Fenians like O'Donovan Ross raised money and arms for the cause. Without Joe McGurrity, a Tyrone man, and his ability to raise funds, there may not have been any rising whatsoever. In the 1970s, other groups like Norreid, Clan na Gael, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the Irish American Unity Conference, and the Brehon Law Society all supported oppressed communities in the north. So whether it was the first generation or the 10th generation, Irish America has remained true and loyal to its homeland, and for that we are forever grateful. It's actually significant that the proclamation itself acknowledges this when it refers to the role of our exiled children in America. And the people of Ireland has also taken inspiration from here. When the United Irish Society was plotting rebellion, they drew their inspirations from the French and the American revolutions. In particular, the writings of Thomas Paine and his Rights of Man were found an enthusiastic audience in Ireland, especially in Belfast. And the Republican connection between all three nations is well expressed in Cork in 1797 in what is described as the Catechism of the United Irish Society. What is that in your hand? It is a branch of what? Of the tree of liberty. Where did it first grow? In America. Where does it bloom? In France. Where did the seeds fall? In Ireland. At its core, the Irish struggle is about rights. The rights of the people of Ireland, like the people of the USA, to determine our own destiny. It's about our right to shape a society which reflects the needs of all our citizens. It is about the republic proclaimed outside the GPO in Dublin 100 years ago. And that transformative moment in Irish history saw the coming together of separatists, Republicans, socialists, nationalists, suffragettes, trade unionists, writers, poets, and Irish language activists. And they created a great revolutionary movement to liberate Ireland and establish a democratic and egalitarian republic. Sean Cronin, a writer, a Republican, a revolutionary, who spent a lot of time here in the States, wrote of these men and women. None of them considered themselves to be heroes, but all were heroes. They were ordinary men and women, and their military training was minimal. In that lies their glory. They believed that Ireland should be free In that lies their greatness. Across the island of Ireland, poorly equipped men and women rose in defiance and against the largest empire in human history. Think of it. The Great Hunger was still in living memory. National morale was at the bottom. The workers had been defeated in 1913 in the Great Lockouts. But these men and women believed that society could be ordered in a different way, that the connection with Britain could be broken, and that a new republic could be established. It lasted for 6 days. In the end, the British suppressed it. They court-martialed and they executed the leaders. And they did so with great speed. And that wasn't just the knee-jerk reaction of an imperial power. That wasn't just the general in charge having his own way. That was a deliberate, conscious effort to remove the thinkers, the people who had put together the proclamation, the people who had planned the uprising, to remove that, to remove the most revolutionary cadre of the leadership. And it wasn't therefore hard to figure out why, in a few short years, the revolution was overtaken by a counter-revolution, and we inherited the Ireland that we have today, a partitioned island. But of course, the British failed. And I've been reading about the rising and what happened, and reading the writings of the people who were out, and particularly those who were in the leadership. And I have to say that I grow more and more and more in admiration and respect for them every time I hear and read about their exploits. They were mighty men and women. And of course, apart from the defiance and the great courage that they showed, the most important part of the rising is the proclamation. It's our Declaration of Independence. It's our Bill of Rights. It's rolled up and they got it onto one page, which is remarkably difficult for any Irish person to do. And it remains the mission statement of modern Irish republicanism. Women didn't have a vote. How does it start? Irish men and Irish women. Just by a straight 3 words. An acknowledgement of equality. It boldly states that it was committed to pursue the happiness and the prosperity of the whole nation and all of its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally. It guarantees civil and religious liberties. It reaches out to our unionist neighbours in the north. It promotes equal rights and equal opportunities for all of its citizens. And it's a declaration of social and economic intent for a rights-based society, a citizen-centred, rights-based society. Does that exist in Ireland today? Is the republic that we have the same republic proclaimed here? Of course not. The crisis in homelessness, the crisis which have many of you here in the USA in the first instance, the fact that so many of our children are living in poverty, all of those are clear indications that this is not the republic that we see in the proclamation. And there are many people now, and there's an increasing radicalization and politicization of people, and many will agree with that assertion. But there's also another aspect, the fact that our island is still partitioned, that we haven't got a 32-county state that we can call our own. So that's the challenge facing all of us. Because be sure of this, if the men and women who signed and who were part of that revolutionary period had actually went on to form a working government, it would be a different Ireland, a totally different type of Ireland to the one we have at this point. So our primary political goal has to be to end partition. It has to be to end the union with Britain and to bring about a new national democracy. And that requires reconciliation, it requires outreach, it requires sensible talking, it requires bringing everybody together, it requires reuniting the people. And we also have to be very mindful, as Fintan Lawler put it, that it isn't just political freedom, it's social freedom. We need to be able to look after our elderly, look after our aged, look after our young, ensure that our women, and ensure that those people with disabilities, ensure that those who need help, ensure that anybody, wherever they're born on the island of Ireland, has the same rights as everybody else, and that this issue of a two-tier Ireland and elitism and the elites running our affairs, that ends. And James Connolly refers to the reconquest of Ireland by the Irish people. And that's the only way, by the people themselves taking power, by the people themselves taking freedom. Because, of course, yes, you can have an armed coup. You can get rid of a government. You know, when Ireland was partitioned, a native elite took over from the Old English ascendancy. But there was no deep-rootedness. So it's the reconquest of Ireland